Welcome aboard. This is the Miles to Go podcast. And now here's your host, Ed Pizza.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Miles to Go podcast. Mr. Kerr and I are a little punchy as I sit here in Vegas very early in the morning, and he is already through, 35 Zoom calls so far?
Only 3 here at 10:07 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Only 3. Well, in keeping with the theme of being a professional podcaster while I'm on the road, this is the tripod that I brought with me. So for those that are listening, I don't actually have a tripod, so I'll be holding my microphone, which Jeremiah always really loves when he gets that inconsistent audio as I move the mic back and forth near my mouth. So Jeremiah, I apologize right at the top of the show for my failures as a podcaster. Mr. Kerr, we're going to talk a little bit about some broken planes at Delta, and I've got the math for my long Tokyo trip with the family. I thought it'd be helpful for folks to see what we spent, where we spent it on points and in cash. And then if we have time, as I've said so many times, we'll talk a little bit of Fantasy Springs, Tokyo Disney Sea. A little bit of housekeeping. If you want to text us or leave us a voicemail, 571-293-6659. He is at Kerr Points on all of those social media channels. I am at Pizza in Motion, and you can find the show, the Miles to Go podcast, on TikTok and Instagram. Mr. Kerr, start with a little bit of a somber note because as our work schedules happened to push us to a little bit of an earlier recording time, we were actually recording on September 11th. My wife reminded me this morning. She was watching a show recapping some of the horrible stuff that happened 23 years ago, and I was just thinking, if I remember correctly, you were in England or you were in Europe when it
I was
9/11. Yeah, you were in school. I think
I was in high school. They did, yeah. The headmaster of the school came in, whatever class I was in that afternoon, pulled me out. He had a BBC News page printed off from his old inkjet printer that had a picture of the World Trade Center on fire. And he said, "Hey, do you know anybody in New York City? Is your family from there?" I said, "No, but what's going on?" And he was like, I think you'll find out more. Just want to make sure that you didn't have any family in New York City. And I remember getting home from school, and my mom had the TV on, and she was watching it. And she was actually supposed to fly back the next day from England.
Oh, really?
My older brother's still here back in the States. And she couldn't fly back for like a week or until, flight started or whatnot.
Yeah.
And, I was, 10th grade. So what is that, like 13, 14? Like, you don't really comprehend, it looks terrible on TV. But until you get a little bit older, you don't quite comprehend what that meant. But, man, I was thinking about it last night. Oh, boy, we're going to go off. We're going to go this one. Last night was the presidential debate.
Careful.
You guys and the rest of the people in our group chat are much more interested in politics than I am. I think I've made it pretty clear.
I did not get to watch the debate. I feel like I did based on the comments, but I did not get to watch it.
I just looking at that last night and whatever that was. I just don't have an interest in politics because of last night. And then you contrast that to September 12th, 2001, and where we were as a country and everything was great, man. It's just, wow, in only 23 years, how things have fallen, I guess is the way to say it. It's a little bit sad to me. So I was thinking about a little bit torn this morning, thinking about, wow, how close and everybody came together back then. And now 23 years later, we are so divided pretty much head to toe that it makes me a little bit sad, man. So that's kind of where my head was this morning.
Yeah, I hear you. We were in a very different place. And I remember I was at work. We found out I was just pulling into the office. I had an office not too far from Dulles, down the far end of Dulles runway. There, they had some fighter jets stashed there that took off and scared the bejesus out of us and sort of told us that what was being reported on the news was real. And when you talk about unity and the way we were as a country, I remember would have been November. So call it a full 2 months after 9/11. November is when I used to go to the hotel show in New York every year, and so I went to the hotel show, and I went down to that area of Manhattan, where all the devastation was. It was a little difficult to get there. A lot of roads were closed, temporary structures, all that.
I was about to say, how close did they let you get 2 months after? Surely, not very close at all.
Closer than I was expecting. So if you know Battery Park, most people listening won't know Battery Park, but Battery Park's a good viewing area for most of that. And I was able to get to Battery Park in sort of a very circuitous way because there's a bridge that went over West Side Highway. And anyways, meandered my way through. And what I saw, other than the fact that it was very, very quiet, which was just weird. There's so many businesses that were shuttered. But what you saw everywhere were just what you noted, signs of unity. There were obviously lots of shrines to people that were lost. In the attacks, there were commemorations for all the brave firefighters and policemen and first responders. It was a show of togetherness and unity. The business owners that were shut down were, providing drinks and snacks to aid workers that were working on digging through the rubble. It was everybody pitching in to make something better of it. That's one of the many lasting memories I have of 9/11. That's a little bit more on the positive side of just seeing people picking up the pieces down in Lower Manhattan, Battery Park area, just trying to one step at a time put it back together, and not really caring about anything other than putting it back together and putting the lives that weren't lost back together. So 23 years later, it's not something I think that you and I will ever forget. And I think as it gets further and further in the rearview mirror, it's important to me to talk a little bit about it, to make sure that folks who are younger who may not have had a good realization of what it meant to our country, that still has a place in history. As I've said a number of times to a number of people, I feel like for our generation, it's probably the closest we'll get to a version of Pearl Harbor. And God willing,
hopefully,
God willing, exactly.
Hopefully.
God willing, we don't have anything worse.
I don't know about that, but hopefully,
God willing, it's the worst that you and I deal with.
All right, happier topics, happier days.
Yes, happier topics. Although the first topic we're going to talk about is a tail coming off of a Delta plane at your home airport in Atlanta.
Yes. As happened yesterday, September 10th, here at time of recording, a CRJ 900 was awaiting takeoff on a little taxiway that was going to be an intro to the runway on the north side of the Atlanta airport, and an A350 came by and its taxi lane, center line, but the CRJ had not scooted up far enough, or the controller had wrongfully given clearance to A350, and that wing took off the entire vertical stabilizer of the CRJ 900. You look at those pictures and you're like, wow, that's really bad. They quickly last night, of course, the closed circuit television videos of the collision had, of course, gotten onto social media that fast. You can just I don't know, man. This was an interesting conversation yesterday. So as I've alluded to many times, a lot of my buddies here in the neighborhood are Delta pilots, a lot of Delta mechanics. And I was messaging them yesterday afternoon. I was like, all right, so who knows how much that costs to fix the wing of a brand new A350? And then, can you even fix the CRJ 900, or is that a complete write-off if you shear off the vertical stabilizer? And I was like, so who's held responsible here? And I kind of knew the answer beforehand, but their answer was, oh, nobody's going to get fired. Somebody's just going to have to do remedial training, and then you go forward. And that is such a weird thing about the aviation industry to me. I don't know if it's because of unions or if it's because, I don't know, man, but any other job, you make let's conservatively call it a $10 million mistake. Perhaps a lot more than that.
Yeah, a lot more.
You make a 8-figure mistake, you're probably going to get fired, right? But not in aviation. Best case you make a mistake like that is just remedial training and the company has a fork over 8 figures. Worst case, you kill somebody. But how, man, I can't, if I go and I make a $8 million, $10 million, if I make a $50,000 mistake tomorrow, I'm fired, right? So,
right.
Why is that the case for these guys? And I don't think any of my buddies listened to this, but I knew that their answer was going to be, no, you can't get fired. And then several of them went into this, experience comes from making mistakes. And you can't fire somebody for making a mistake. And I'm like, in today's zero defect mentality world, what are you talking about? I don't understand it. So if you look at the video, right, the A350 guy, he's centerline on his taxiway. But if you just look out the window, there's a CRJ 900 right there that's really close. Probably going to hit it. Is that their fault? Maybe a little bit. Should the CRJ 900 not have been there? Maybe they got told to wait there. So is it ATC's fault? Which ATC ground controller is going to get fired? The answer is nobody's going to get fired. Do a little remedial training and some memos go around for Delta pilots. Hey, don't shear off the vertical stabilizer. Why is that the case, man? I can't comprehend that, where that's just not the case in very many other industries.
Yeah, I think, A, I think you're right. B, I think, for anybody who thinks that planes taxi slowly and harmlessly, that A350 was not moving that fast, and it took that vertical stabilizer off in a hurry.
Without effort.
I don't know.
Took it off.
Yeah, we said there was no effort. I don't know. We were talking about this. You, Howie, and I were talking about this via group text. I do think that they have to scrap the CRJ. I just can't imagine it'd be worth the repair cost. I mean, there are a lot of variables there that I'm just not an expert on, so I won't try to hypothesize too much. I am curious what the repair costs are on the 350, because I can't imagine you can just repair the wing, because of the carbon fiber and the way the wing comes together, I would think the wing has to be replaced, which has to be a pretty massive project. If it only has to be repaired, that's going to be massive as well, because those are whatever, $150, $200 million planes new. So, I mean, just staggering amount of money that's going to be lost on top of all the commercial loss, because neither one of those planes is flying anytime soon. I mean, how many months do you think that A350 will be on the ground?
Yeah, long time. Not to mention all the people that were about to take off to Haneda that went right back to the terminal. Probably not right back. Probably sat there for a long time. And then back, and you're like, well, now I lost a day in Japan.
Yeah, I agree. Just weird to see. I mean, like you see wings rub here and there. We've seen some of that sort of stuff at airports before, but it isn't very often that you see something that aggressive. And I'll see if we can't get the footage plugged in here.
But why is nobody fired? That's what I'm curious about. Why is nobody held accountable to the degree of losing?
Come on, we already got political once. Let's not get political again.
That's not political. This is just serious.
Sure it is. The reason why nobody's getting fired is because they're union employees.
I don't understand how that's like the case. Like when it's just not the case anywhere else. Yeah, I don't know who. I'm not saying who's at fault. I think probably some blame to go everywhere. But like, I don't understand how nobody's held accountable.
But the union rules largely dictate whether they can or can't be fired for something like this. And I mean, to be clear, like you said, it could be ATC. I don't know. Like looking at the video, I guess that's the only way that I could see where maybe somebody gets fired if it's somebody who's in air traffic control and has made multiple mistakes. If it's pilot error, I just don't see, with what we know about union rules, I just don't see where this could be a terminable offense based on what we've seen in the past and what's been allowed and when pilots are allowed to return to work. And that's not a knock on them. It's just like the job protections are very, very defined, and this isn't a terminable sort of offense. You said talking to your buddies about that this is not something that this would be handled as a training issue regardless of the money involved.
That's wild to me, but I guess I'm good on them. If you can never get fired. Who, again, I don't know whose fault it was. I've seen the video. I don't know. Somebody made mistakes, if everybody made mistakes, but that's just wild to me that much money can be involved. And look, man, you got massive, you're really lucky that wasn't worse, right? You came close to shearing the engines. It's fully fueled for takeoff. You get the wrong spark or the wrong line going. A super massive, very quick explosive fire in that CRJ happens. Dude, it's super lucky that nobody got hurt that way. So even that, not even taking into account the money is wild. So look, I think it's amazing that, ground accidents don't happen more often. Like if you just go stand at the Atlanta airport and you look at how many little luggage tugs, pushback tugs, service vehicles, airport vehicles are flying around through those terminals and concourses. If they had to design the airport today, they wouldn't do it that way because of all of the collisions that could potentially happen and all of the planes pushing back and circling around. And you go to a place like JFK or O'Hare or Newark, it is really stressful, I bet, to control those ground controls. And it's amazing that stuff like that, in my opinion, really doesn't happen more often. But in perfect broad daylight, dude, I just don't get it, man.
I bet there are more tarmac incidents with the smaller vehicles for sure that we just don't hear about because they don't result in the sort of damage that that we're seeing here.
Oh, did you see you don't remember what airport it was last week? Did you see the Southwest tug that went into the break room? Or I don't know if it was a Southwest tug, but the tug that broke through the wall from the airport and into the Southwest break room. Oh my God, man. Whoa, that stuff's crazy.
Yeah, but you make the comment about the A350 being on the center line, which I didn't notice in the video. So, I mean, from a liability standpoint, I guess that leads to the open question, which, again, I still don't think anybody's getting fired. But, I mean, I don't even know in that situation how much the A350 pilot is supposed to be watching what's beside the wings. I would assume that they're supposed to, but if he's on center line or she's on center line, I don't know that we've heard whether it's a male or female crew, are they quote unquote in the right? I mean, I guess they could be, but I mean, they should still be able to see that their wings aren't clear. And I understand those are some pretty big wings, but it's a very interesting question to me that if that plane was exactly where it was supposed to be on the center line, do they have responsibility to be watching the edges of the wings, which, obviously is pretty hard to see from where they sit.
I don't know. I hope it doesn't happen again. To be continued. But, dude, speaking of Southwest, man, I learned something last night from my sister that I did not know when it comes to using Southwest Love Vouchers. So my sister was flying from Denver back to Houston about 2 weeks ago. And they said, hey, we need 3 volunteers. We're going to give you, I think she was like $1,600 to get off the flight and take a later one. And she was like, absolutely, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So she said like 3 of them agreed to it. And then they were waiting there for the plane to board. And she actually said that the boarding agent was like, okay, well, I only need 2 of you. So one of you guys is going to have to go back and board the plane. And she was like, all 3 of us said, absolutely not. You promised us $1,600. We're not going. And the gate agent eventually said, whatever, I'm not messing with this, and gave them each $1,600 vouchers. So my sister, who's a school teacher, like $1,600 to any of us is a massive deal, but to her is a huge deal on a school teacher's salary, especially as she has to fly from Houston back to my parents in Charleston over the holidays is what she does every time. So last night she said, hey, Richard, I used my voucher to book flights from Houston to Charleston, South Carolina for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And she was like, but I just had to pay like $150 in taxes and fees that the voucher wouldn't cover. And I was like, what? Was it? She was like, I thought it was $5.60. I said, well, it's not an award ticket. So that's, the TSA fee for $5.60 is what you're thinking about there, but it's a cash ticket. I was like, send me a screenshot. So sure enough, man, she sent me the screenshot last night. I'll have to text it to you, but it shows like here all the voucher did not cover the base fare, but on a flight from Houston to Charleston round trip, here's what it did not cover. U.S. transportation tax of $28.73, 9/11 security fee $11.20 for there and back, U.S. flight segment tax of $10, and U.S. passenger facility charge of $9. So the Love voucher covered $383.03, and she had to pay $58.93 out of pocket that the voucher wouldn't cover.
So
and I was like, I'll be honest, girlfriend, I had never heard of this before, but like I've never had a Love voucher before. No. But really, man, like you can't use a voucher, like you still have to pay out of pocket when using a Southwest voucher?
That's so weird.
I'm like, man, I didn't know all about that. If you're flying somewhere international with even larger taxes and fees, then like that Love voucher gets a lot less, value than face value off of it. So would love to hear other people's experiences. It's like a known thing. Like, how do I not ever know this? But that kind of stinks.
Yeah, interesting. I've never known. That's interesting. And I don't know any other airline that does it that way. The vouchers are usually good for whatever you're paying for a ticket.
Weird, man. We'll text you that screenshot so you can see. That's one. So she had to do that for 2 round trip tickets. So she's out over $100. But hey, way better than what they were charging for Christmas and Thanksgiving flights. But she was like, $158 to me on school teacher salary is still a big deal here. So, well, kind of weird.
All right. Well, let's get into the math of my Japan and Hawaii trip. And if we have time, we'll talk a little Disney Fantasy Springs. But for folks who might recall, for a trip, we did Tokyo, Kyoto, Waikiki, Maui, and then home. And we chose to split up the trip home, even knowing that was going to cost us a lot more miles. But when you break it all down, it's a bunch of different numbers here. I'll try to go through them quickly so we don't spend a ton of time on it. And I'll see if I can maybe put up a little spreadsheet. It was 10, 13, 16, 17, 18, 19 nights in hotels. So almost 3 weeks. And we had 2 red-eye flights in there. So I mean, it was effectively a 3-week trip. But we had 1 hotel on United on the way over and 1 quote-unquote hotel and coffin suites on Delta on the way back to Hawaii. So first, the cash components, which for us were all, use your words, Ed, Capital One Venture miles. So I had saved up a bunch of these, as you know, in anticipation of this trip and burned out the entire supply. So Disney was about $4,000 with that massive package that we had to buy for 3 nights worth of rooms, tickets, the whole bit. So that, again, Capital One miles. We spent about $800 for 2 one-way, 4-passenger green car / first class Shinkansen tickets on the bullet train from Tokyo to Kyoto and back. What I consider to be the least valuable expense on the trip, $2,600 for one of our Grand Hyatt Tokyo rooms, which was the Pokemon experience, which was definitely a disappointment. So all told...
Whoa, what? Say that number again for the Pokemon experience? Yeah, just go gloss over that.
I didn't gloss over it. I said it was the most disappointing part. $2,600.
$2,600 for how many nights? 5 nights?
And not all 5 nights were in the Pokemon suite. So if it were 5 nights were in the Pokemon suite, the number would have been bigger. So, yeah.
Woof.
Yeah, so the $2,600 was for 2 nights at Pokemon? Yeah. And then we had a dinner in there. So, like, I mean, I take that back because there was a dinner that was charged in there, too. So you take away the dinner, and it's probably more like closer to $2,000, but still almost $1,000 a night. Actually, probably was a little over $1,000 a night per night Yeah, because dinner wasn't $500, so it was over $1,000 a night for the Pokemon experience, which was not anywhere near worth it, unfortunately. Beautiful hotel, Pokemon experience, not there. So all in, about $7,000 worth of Capital One Venture miles. Only other thing that we spent money on was Haneda to Honolulu flights. You might recall we were able to find global upgrade availability, so we spent about $2,000 on 4 tickets. They're a little under $500 a piece. And then I used global upgrade certificates to move us from premium economy to Delta One on the overnight flight, coffin class, business class seats. So that was all the cash stuff. On the point side of the ledger, interesting mix of things here. So Dulles to Haneda was 260,000 United miles, and then we used plus points to upgrade those tickets because there were 50-ish, 55,000. I think we couldn't get all 4 at 55,000. I think the last 1 or 2 bumped up to a higher tier, but we were able to use plus points from Premium Plus. On the flight back, like this was pricey, and I still hate doing Hawaii to the East Coast on any other way other than stopping on the West Coast, but it drove up the price. We paid 123,000 United miles to go from Maui to San Francisco, 2 of us in coach, 2 of us in first, and there wasn't any extra cost for the 2 in first. Those were plus points. And then we spent another 100,000 to fly San Francisco Dulles, 25,000 per person, just a touch more than that, in coach on a very busy route on United, which shows the lack of value on a lot of domestic awards on United right now. So,
and only a 14-hour delay included on that flight?
I think it was 13-hour delay. Yeah.
13. Yeah, only a 13-hour delay included with your 25,000.
Included on that. Yeah, and so that was we only cleared 1 plus point upgrade on that one. So when I look at that number, it's 225,000 miles to fly from Hawaii to Dulles with a hotel stop in between. The only other way to really do it from Hawaii, from the islands, is to fly a red eye, which just sucks on most of those planes because they're almost all narrow bodies.
Yep. That's the way to do it, man, with family. You got to fly back to the West Coast, spend the night, and then fly back the next day if you're going all the way East Coast. Not sitting in the back of a Delta 767-400 for 10 hours on a red eye and land in Atlanta at 5 a.m. Whew, nope. Pass for me.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it wouldn't have been a ton cheaper because the nonstop to Dulles is wicked expensive on United because it's one flight a day. I think it's a 7-6 right now, but the departure time is brutal. You leave at 3:00 in the afternoon Honolulu time, and you land at 6 a.m. local time, but you're landing essentially at bedtime from Hawaii. You're landing at call it roughly midnight. So
yeah, it'd be messed up from that.
And then so for points for hotels, we had 5 nights at Hyatt Regency Kyoto. We did 2 rooms there. That hotel does not participate in the suite upgrade program, which I found odd. But anyway, 182,000 points for 5 nights at Hyatt Regency Kyoto. Grand Hyatt Tokyo, as I mentioned, we paid cash for part and points for part, so there's another 60,000 points at Grand Hyatt Tokyo. We had 92,000 points for Hyatt Regency Waikiki, 2 rooms, 2 nights. They upgraded both rooms. One more room was, I think, if you stayed at Hyatt Regency Waikiki, I know you stayed at Hyatt Centric Waikiki.
Yep.
So we got the sort of like junior Swedish upgrade room, and the both rooms were not full ocean view, but mostly ocean view. We booked the whatever city view, and then 175,000 points for Hyatt Regency Maui. Again, suite upgrade applied there. Had a beautiful 2-room suite, and then another regular room. So tons of space for us as a family there. 175,000 for 3 nights at Hyatt Regency Maui, and then finally 40,000 points, 2 rooms at Grand Hyatt SFO. Another suite upgrade applied to Grand Hyatt, and a beautiful corner suite that they have that overlooks the international terminal at Grand Hyatt at SFO Airport. So total on points out of pocket, 549,000 Hyatt points, 490,000 airline miles. So essentially $1 million, program currency, and call it almost $10,000 in Capital One Venture miles, million venture.
So just as if you new to the podcast or anything, Ed gets to put a lot of business spend on his cards. Is how he's not signing up for 20 credit cards a month in order to do this. He is very fortunate in that he works his butt off, but one of the perks of working your butt off in his case is getting to put a lot of business spend on those cards so you can generate such high amounts of points and miles and make it happen. I don't have that many, but Dude, doing all that 3-week trip to Japan and Hawaii for very little out of pocket is just ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. I am curious, if I told you ahead of time, 3-week trip, I'm curious what you would have said I would have spent in terms of miles and points. So I effectively spent 2 million points / miles, let's call it plus or minus, for 4 people to fly business class everywhere we went. Well, not everywhere. The domestic flights back from Hawaii were obviously not all business class, but mostly business class on the long haul stuff, 2 rooms everywhere we went, suites, the whole bit. What's your opinion of, it seemed like a lot of points when I got done. So I'm curious if you think that that's like, holy cow, it's like you spent way too much, or, all right, that was reasonable for what you got, considering we got 2 rooms instead of 1 room everywhere we went.
Yeah, 2 rooms for everywhere. I would have put you right in the 1.5 to 2 million points is where I thought you would have spent for 3 weeks. You could have maybe pared some of that down, but I don't think really for what you got. But, that's like a, what, $30,000 trip that you got for not very much out of pocket, if not more.
Probably more than
trip
that,
for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Business class flights and all that. I'm like, you're looking at $50,000 trip for 4 people, for 3 weeks. So awesome. That's why we do this stuff, why we hang in there with points and miles. And then like the other side of that is there's a lot of ninja kung fu like knowledge and stuff that you got to do to pull that off. Like you got to have status. You got to know how to use plus points. You got to have global upgrade certificates. You got to know which routes those are good on. You got to find the space. You got to find the award availability. You got to get suite upgrade certificates. You got it's just years of experience that we have in order to like pull that off, because other people are like, hey, I got some Chase Sapphire points. I want to do all this stuff. I'm like, that's really just half of the game is getting the points and miles. The other half is like, you just have to know how to use this stuff, which goes back. Dude, I got a lot of comments about my commentary last week on, there's not really that many bloggers around these days. It's just Instagram, TikTok influencers get this credit card where nobody really talks about, besides the stuff that everybody says, Flying Blue promo awards and whatnot. So, I think that institutional knowledge is important. Whoever wants to get out there and share that knowledge. And I'll tell you the other thing, like there's money to be made right now. I've said this in the group chat this week as well. Every publisher I know is hitting me up to find freelance writers. Everybody needs good freelance writers in this space, because there is no talent coming in to fill the gap as people like you and I move out of writing every single day. And like, if you're a good writer, and by the way, it's only half of it. Like you have to be responsive. You have to be professional. Everybody says that, but you will not believe how many people do not have the basic communication skills or responsiveness to be a good freelancer. If you can be a good freelancer, man, $500 an article is what you can get paid right now. And everybody needs writers. So like, if you really want to do that stuff and share the, institutional knowledge, like there's a place to go get paid right now, which is not the case when I was first starting.
No, I agree. I definitely agree that there are a lot of people leaving the writing world rather than coming in. I think, when I think about the trip and the miles and all that stuff, I think we always come back to this philosophy. There's a different way to travel. Talk about the right way, the wrong way. I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way to spend points. I think you could choose to do this trip a number of different ways. And if you want to stretch travel out, you could travel in coach on some of these flights. You could travel in premium economy. You could get 1 room instead of 2. We chose a fairly luxurious way to spend our points. That being said, if I look at it, I spent 550,000 Hyatt points. If I wanted to trim down to 1 room, so let's just say I save half of it because there were some certificates and stuff in there. So I save 250,000 Hyatt points. That's a lot of points. Don't get me wrong, but in the grand scheme of a 3-week trip, it's a little over 10% of what we spent in total. So I think I think lots of people would choose to do this differently, and I want to hear everybody talk about that. Send us comments, notes. I'll be interested to hear what the Slack community says about it. But that's the breakdown of the trip. And in these last few minutes left, Mr. Kerr, let's talk a little Disney. So for folks who don't like Disney, this would be the point where you could stop. But why would you? We're 2 very compelling individuals, and you should listen. And watch.
I do have one very short story after Disney to share, so you don't have to leave yet.
Okay, yeah, don't leave. Yeah, don't leave. Richard's got a story. Does it involve a soapbox?
No, it doesn't. No, no soapboxes.
All right. So quickly on Fantasy Springs, this is the new park within a park at Tokyo Disney. It's part of Tokyo Disney Sea. There is a separate hotel that's attached to the park. We have struggled mightily to find availability there. I logged on every morning right when rooms were made available, Tokyo time, and for 3 weeks, never got a sniff of it. Finally ended up booking the other properties, which we talked about on the show a handful of weeks ago. I would say, it's a lot of money to stay at those hotels. I'm not sure it's worth the value unless you're getting something out of it, like getting into Fantasy Springs. But two things about Fantasy Springs. First, what we thought of it, and then second, a way to hack it if you don't want to spend a bunch of money on hotels at Tokyo Disney. There are 4 rides inside Fantasy Springs, which doesn't sound like a lot. There's a Rapunzel ride, a Frozen ride, a Pinocchio ride, and Tinkerbell ride. Tinkerbell ride's like a 5-year-old, ride. It's 90 seconds. It's not something I would ride again. If you have very young kids, it's worth it. But otherwise, not worth it. The Rapunzel ride is beautiful. The boat ride, I wish it was longer. There's a little bit of a shorter ride, but they did an incredible job on it. Our favorite of the 4 rides. The version of Frozen that they built is much better than the version at Epcot. Still wasn't our favorite, but it's definitely a much better version of the Epcot version of the Frozen Adventure. And then the Pinocchio ride, which is a very interesting ride. It sort of combines a bunch of live animation with animatronics, sort of like it has Mickey and Minnie Runaway Railway feel, riderless or trackless vehicles, but with a lot of animatronics mixed in. And they did a good job on the Pinocchio stuff. So that was a fun one. Only 4 rides, which, most people would say, well, gosh, how much am I going to spend to just ride 4 rides? The park itself is beautiful. I mean, the detail on the rock faces, the characters that they have carved into it. There's a massive pirate ship in the middle of a lagoon that the 4 rides surround. So walking around is unbelievably beautiful. Outside of the Frozen ride, there's a village of houses. There's no shops or anything in the houses or anything like that. It's just a village of houses that you might see wherever, Anna and Elsa, lived. And you could just sort of wander through back alleys. The hotel itself, massive, beautiful, the whole bit. But it really felt like we were transported to another world. And so I would say, loved the experience. Still not sure if it was worth the money, but loved the experience. They did an incredible job, which everything at Tokyo Disney, they put a ton of money into, and you could see it here. I mean, tons and tons of detail, tons and tons of little touches here and there. There are 2 restaurants. There's a restaurant over by the Pinocchio ride, and then there's a restaurant over by the Anna and Elsa ride. It's called like the Snuggly Duckling or something like that. We ate there. Surprisingly good food. Not great, but good food. But if you don't want to spend a bunch of money, the hack that I would leave folks with is, it's not really a hack, if you will, but if you're on the app, which you kind of have to be at any Disney park today, you know that, Richard, you can actually try to get standby access for one of the 4 rides. And so the way it works today, which can obviously change because they've already changed a couple times, you need to have Happy Early Entry Access, which is a 15-minute head start if you're staying at one of the hotels. And Happy Early Entry Access continues to change. So at one point while we were there, if you're staying at the Tokyo Disneyland Hotel, you didn't get early access to Disney Sea. Now they flipped it around the other way. If you're staying at Disney's Miracosta, you don't get happy early access to Tokyo Disneyland. So you should definitely watch the website. Thankfully, I had screenshots of what was available when we booked, and I was able to show them the screenshots, and we still got our happy early entry access, even though they changed the rules after we booked. So I would do that research ahead of time, know what you can get yourself into. But once you have the app open, you can actually, if you have tickets for Tokyo Disney Sea, you can jump in quick. They sell out quickly, but you can get a standby pass for rides in Fantasy Springs, and then you'll have access to Fantasy Springs. The way they handle it today, once you have access to Fantasy Springs, you can only ride the one ride that you have access for. You can't stand in any of the standby lines. You literally need a pass to stand in the standby lines. I imagine that will change as demand drops off, but probably no time soon. But it does give you the ability to walk around, eat in the restaurants, shop in the gift shop, go explore all the nooks and crannies. Because if you don't have that standby pass, you literally can't even buy Fantasy Springs merchandise because 90+% of it is all contained in Fantasy Springs. So it's its own little world, if you will. And your 2 ways in are spend a boatload of money on a hotel or be first in line and hope you win the lottery when you're smashing the button on the app trying to get a standby pass.
That sounds so Disney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's like, what? Okay. Sure.
So that's the quick rundown on Fantasy Springs. Happy to answer questions for folks that have trips planned there. We did a lot of research into it, a lot. And I think it's well worth it if you're a Disney fan. Tokyo Disney Sea is an incredible park. I don't know, did we ever talk about Tokyo Disney Sea, or should we do that another day? Because I know we're starting to run long. But I don't think we talked about Tokyo Disney Sea in general on the pod after I went there. We talked about it with Leslie in summer, but I hadn't been there yet. So maybe we'll do that in the future. Unbelievable park. but I know you got work to do. I got work to do. And you have one more story.
Yeah, this is a story of how I lost my first ever suitcase, never to be seen again, but why it was one of the best trips ever. So I alluded to this on Instagram stories the other day, and a lot of people wanted the full story that came back in my DMs. So 2009, I'm a brand new officer in the Navy, and I was in submarine school where you have to go for 3 months after you finish basic training. After you finish logistics officer school, you got one more school before you can show up to a submarine. I was there in the winter of 2009 to 2010, and Navy Morale, Welfare, and Recreation, MWR, came out and said, hey, we're going to have a Navy-wide fantasy football contest. And I was like, oh, okay.
Now I know where
sure, I'll sign up. I'll sign up with the other, 150,000 people from the Navy that sign up for this, because the grand prize was a trip for two to the Super Bowl in Miami. This was Super Bowl 44 in February of 2010. So you start the season, and it was a very weird setup. The way they had it, I guess you had to do it when 150,000 people were there. I drafted the class, and I got, through the draft, and I was like, wow, I think I got a couple wild cards in here, but this would be pretty good. I should finish in the top 10,000 people for this thing. And by the end of week 5 or week 6, I was in 8th place at 150,000 people. And I was like, wow, this is going to really stink. Because the prize for second place? Absolutely nothing. So you were playing for first place or nothing. We go through the season, man. I can't believe it. It's all of my buddies are watching this now. The whole schoolhouse is watching. This dude's going to win, potentially win. Last week comes down and boom, second place by a few points in the entire Navy. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, man. So as the 22-year-old officer I was, we went and, kind of drank our sorrows away one night in the bar to celebrate the second place finish. I got an email the next day that said, hey, Ensign Kerr, just a heads up, man. It turns out first place was an employee of MWR, the organization in the Navy that runs this, and they're ineligible to win. So congrats, you won. And you're the Super Bowl.
You shook off the hangover.
Shook it off, man. I was like, whoa, man. I remember being in the little hotel we had to stay in on base in Connecticut for submarine school and grabbing everybody and we're going to Super Bowl. Yeah, in Connecticut submarine school. So long story short, man, I called my dad and I was like, Dad, what are you doing for the Super Bowl? And he was like, I don't know. Why are you calling and asking me that? And I was like, well, let's go, dude. I got to pick somebody else. And Emily had no interest in she's not a football person and knew my dad would appreciate it. So he was like, what? And I was like, dude, I won. We're going. He's like, how much is it going to cost? I was like, absolutely nothing. So I tell you, man, it was funny. I'll wrap the story up. A blizzard came through the Northeast and I had to end up leaving 2 days early so I wouldn't miss the Super Bowl, which was a huge headache. You can't miss class when you're in the Navy. There's no taking leave or vacation while you're in a schoolhouse. It's not going to happen. I had to go up to the captain, the big commanding officer, and I was like, hey, sir, I want to go to the Super Bowl. I want to. He was like, yeah, okay, we'll make it. I fully expected him to say no. So I had to fly Connecticut to Chicago. My suitcase never made it out of Chicago to Miami. Get to Miami. My dad was in South Carolina, and because of the flights and everything, he had to go Greenville to Dulles and back down. I don't remember why now, but we show up. I have no suitcase, no clothes in my bag whatsoever. Get a rental car or go over to the Walmart or something in Miami, and I have the most ridiculous clothes on. Had an amazing time. Navy hooked us up, hotel, everything. We saw the Super Bowl. I got a picture I'm looking at now in my office of, they sent us to a tailgate party beforehand and the ticket and then the picture of us after the Super Bowl. It was Breeze versus Manning, so it ended up being awesome. Never saw that suitcase again. It flew United. United could never tell me what happened to it. Never saw it again. Luckily, didn't have any of my uniforms or anything in it, but, always wondered to this day, hey, where did that suitcase ever end up? And then now, 2024, I have never finished in the top 3 of any fantasy football league, even if there's just 12 of us in the neighborhood ever again. So I used up all of my luck in winning the Navy-wide fantasy football contest in 2009 and coming short one suitcase, but my dad still talks about it all the time. So the best, one of the best trips ever.
If you're going to have one win, that's the win to have.
That's the win.
If there's one lesson to take away from all of this, it's what the heck were you doing checking a suitcase?
Dude, this was 6 months before the Points and Miles rabbit hole started. I was a traveler, but I don't even remember now, why. I was not, I was not who I am today. Let's just say that way. No idea why I was checking a suitcase, probably just because that's what you did back then. But 6 months later is when I found boarding area and flyer talk and went down the rabbit hole. But it was a good memory, man.
You're going to Miami for the Super Bowl, so you got 3 T-shirts, 2 pairs of shorts, a Speedo, and a razor. What are we checking the bag
A lot of
for here, man?
Speedos, a lot of banana hammocks. Yep. Yeah. No idea.
All right. Well, if there isn't a more perfect place to land the plane, it's thinking about my podcast co-host, Rhett Butler, in a banana hammock.
You are welcome.
Well, I am. I'll be home from Vegas. Actually, no, I'm sorry. I will have gone to Vegas a second time by the time this episode drops, unfortunately. But I'm at the Circa Las Vegas. And short note, if you didn't see it in Slack, Mr. Kerr, I had I usually have one annual snafu on travel planning where I book something for the wrong date or whatever, which was Hyatt Regency Waikiki. Decided to have my second one this week. Expensive properties on the strip this week is a bunch of conferences, so I booked the Rio, except I didn't book the Rio. And so I got to the Rio, waited in the line, the long line of people, got to the front. She's clickety-clacking, and she's like, I have trouble finding your reservation. And I'm like, oh, no, hold on. I got it right here, except I didn't. So at that point, it was $179 for the Rio, which is about $100 more than I'd want to spend for the Rio. And I'm like, let me just look, because we're going to be downtown. And Fremont Street, Circa, was actually cheaper. I'm like, you know what? we're going to reboot the plan here. I don't have a burning desire to stay at the Rio. It's fine, but no burning desire to stay. And so for $50 less a night, I'm down at Circa Las Vegas, and I have my second mistake of the year.
Yeah, happens to the best of us, man. I will be in Toronto, and then I will be in New York by the time this airs.
All right, well, have fun traveling. Enjoy New York ATC. There is really nothing better in the world than New York ATC right now. I think it's a beautiful thing. I'm hoping, for your sake, that it does not break down for the third time in a month. I'll do my second lap to Vegas while you're doing Toronto and New York. All that and a whole lot more, Mr. Kerr, until we upload again. We've got miles to go. Microsoft Teams is an abomination.